Luke 21:9. But when ye shall hear of wars and commotions, be not terrified, for these things must first come to pass, but the end is not by and by. Then said he unto them, Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. Con. Salutations, your brother Ram Yahweh, E1B1A, 8A1, seed of David, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Night watching. All right. Look at this speech Putin gave to Parliament. All right. Look at the title of this video. Putin, our missiles will target U.S., not just countries where their missiles are stationed. Okay. So, you know, he being a little boastful and cocky about his weapon system. Let me see what else. Oh, yeah, this was his annual Russia president annual speech to Parliament. All right. Let's get a little bit of this.
It's an important point. And we'll have a lot of new information here. The flight time for such missiles will be comparable to the threats we see coming against Russia. We know how we can do this, and we will implement these plans immediately as soon as we see such threats becoming real. I don't think that the international situation today we have today requires further escalation immediately. This is not what we want. And I would like to add something. The United States once sought global domination through global missile defense program. They should abandon these illusions. We will always come up with an appropriate response. Our new weapon systems I mentioned in my State of the Nation address last year, this work continues consistently. We've launched the manufacturing of the Vanguard system. This year it will be supplied to the 1st Regiment of the Strategic Missile Forces. We are also continuing to test the Sarmat heavy missile, Peresvet, and hypersonic missiles, Kinjal, are being tested on combat duty.
All right, let's take a look at some of these missiles he's referencing that they're still advancing and testing currently. All right, it's just a boast, pretty much flexing their muscles, their nuclear muscles. Okay, and again, these are rumors of wars, and the Messiah said, "Don't be terrified when you hear these things." Okay, and you know, these heathens are brothers, and they're really aware of the real threat, which is the threat of the elect of the Most High and His Son. Okay, that's advancing towards them. So this is, you know, also part of this strategy is to throw what you call smoke screens and distractions. Okay, but let's take a look at some videos from late last year, talking about some of these same weapons that as they were developing them, you know, and again show you, you know, Putin is just a proud heathen who just trying to flex his muscles on the U.S. Because they feel they have more advanced weapons. Okay.
On March the 1st, President Putin announced a new generation of weapons vastly superior to anything developed around the world.
У России такое оружие есть.
A hypersonic system, an ICBM with unlimited range, weapons that can fly through dense layers of the atmosphere, a nuclear-powered cruise missile, underwater drones, a unique combat laser complex. That got everyone talking about an arms race and that deadly Russian missile. But from Russia's
Wicked ass he is.
it's the one that feels threatened and wants to restore nuclear parity. So how does that work? And what did Putin mean when he said,
Нас никто не слушал. Послушайте сейчас.
To be clear, nuclear parity came as a result of an arms race. It was provoked by the first and so far only nuclear strike in history.
Which was committed by who?
When the US dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945.
Wow. Was it deadly or was it devastating? Did it kill anybody?
Estimates put the total number of casualties at up to 450,000.
That's a drop in the bucket, you fucking heathen. You kill way more Hebrews than that. We don't get shit, so fuck you and Japan. Salutations, motherfucker. Yeah, that's right.
By 1949, the USSR had its own nuclear weapon ready. By 1952, the US tested the first thermonuclear device. A year later, the Soviet Union followed suit. Both sides began to develop ballistic missiles in an attempt to get ahead of each other. The US installed nuclear weapons in Turkey, and the USSR put missiles in Cuba. It was followed by the Cuban crisis, which saw the world teeter on the brink of nuclear war. Until Moscow and Washington realized there could be no winners. That's when the period of détente came about. By the early 19th.
Okay, and they realized that same thing now. There could be no winners. That's why they're not going to nuke each other to death. And I'm telling you, it's a distraction, all right? And these heathens, they just want to look proud and boast when it's time for them to stand before the people. That's the way these heathens, all right, ever since the Romans been in power.
90s, it seemed the tension between the two countries was over. It was a time of promises, although some would prove empty over time. NATO famously promised Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev that it would not move an inch to the east.
Даже такие были выражения, как это было у Бейкера, у секретаря, что мы и на 10 сантиметров не двинемся в интересах НАТО или что-то.
Recently declassified documents on the 1990 negotiations proved Russia's account is accurate.
If we maintain a presence in a Germany that is part of NATO, there would be no extension of NATO's jurisdiction for forces of NATO 1 inch to the east.
There would be no effort to exclude anyone, and there would be no step taken at this time to push anyone ahead of others.
In 1994, the US changed its mind about expanding east.
We're going to move forward on this, but I'd never spring this on you.
But over the past 18 years,
Fucking
NATO's been
hypocrite.
joined by Hungary, Poland, the Czech Republic, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Albania, Croatia, Montenegro, as well as the former Soviet republics of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. NATO is now at Russia's doorstep. Here is an online meme on how Russia moved its country too close to NATO's military bases. Furthermore, the US moved its missile defenses closer to Russia's borders. Another promise broken by Washington. In 2002, the US pulled out of the ABM treaty signed decades before when the Soviet Union was still in place. What is missile defense? It enables one party to launch its own missiles and intercept any counterstrike. It could guarantee victory in a potential war. Of course, NATO and the US say their missile defenses are not against Russia, but against Iran and North Korea. But the locations tell another story. Missile defense installations were placed in Poland, Romania, California, and Alaska. They're also planned for Japan and South Korea. Missile defense ships patrol the seas close to Russian territory.
Создаются системы, элементы систем противоракетной обороны, что нас очень беспокоит, и мы постоянно об этом говорим в течение 10 лет. Это разрушает стратегический баланс в мире.
The balance is disrupted, and Russia, which hasn't ramped up its missile defenses like the US, is facing a deadly danger.
Вы же все понимаете, о чем идет речь. Чего молчите-то? Вы все молчите. Ситуация усугубляется, ведь это подталкивает гонку вооружений, новый виток создает. Это же очевидная вещь. Вот мы все время думаем, а как ответить? Мы думаем, совершенствовать систему, значит, преодоления систем противоракетной обороны. Вот это и есть виток гонки вооружений.
Russia says it was forced to come up with a weapon capable of bypassing missile defenses in order to restore nuclear parity. The Kinjal MiG-31 can launch hypersonic missiles that can travel at more than 10 times the speed of sound. Thanks to that and their unpredictable trajectory, they are unstoppable. It's an unrivaled weapon. The US doesn't plan to test its hypersonic weapon until 2019. The avant-garde hypersonic vehicle can fly at up to 20 times the speed of sound. An ICBM will take it to an altitude of several dozen kilometers, from where where it can dive headfirst back to Earth at top speed with aircraft-like maneuverability, dodging any missile defenses. In contrast, when other existing ballistic missiles re-enter the atmosphere, they fly at a preset trajectory, making them easy targets for ABM systems. Sarmat might seem like an ordinary ICBM, but its range is much longer. The legendary Topol-M missiles can only take the shortest route through the ABM systems. Sarmat can travel via the North or the South Pole, where there's no missile shield, and it will still hit its target. Most importantly, Sarmat is a heavy missile capable of carrying more than 20 warheads.
Damn.
That's 5 times more than previous generation missiles.
That's a bad number,
missile is a unique weapon. It's basically the same as an American Tomahawk. Whereas the Tomahawk's range is limited to 2,500 kilometers because of fuel constraints, Russia's new missile can fly indefinitely. It can take any path to avoid missile defenses.
That's a damn shame, you heathen. Your top weapons got fuel constraints. You can't run with the horsemen. The footmen, how you gonna run with the horsemen, you heathen?
Similar to the regular drones we're used to, except these are submarine launched and travel at incredible speeds towards their targets under the sea. They run so deep that no equipment can track them. Even if detected, their high speed prevents them from being intercepted. The new weapons can work together to neutralize any existing missile defense systems. Kinjal can destroy ground-based ABM systems. Poseidon drones take care of those at sea. Then, the Sarmat, Avangard, and cruise missiles can be launched towards their target, bypassing any remaining barriers. On top of that, there's also a combat laser complex, Pelasvet, which is unique because it almost instantly delivers an energy beam to a target and has an unlimited battle reserve. Developing new weapons is not a belligerent move, rather a move to restore parity. Perhaps this time the call for a balance of force and fair treatment all round will be heard.
Нас никто не слушал. Послушайте сейчас.
Wicked heathen.
Tonight, new details emerging on the escalating military tensions between the U.S. and Russia. As Pentagon officials game out a response to Russian aggression in Europe, Vladimir Putin is now making some serious moves in the Caribbean. Brian Todd is all over the story for us. Give us the latest, Brian.
Wolf, tonight Putin is on America's doorstep with nuclear-capable bombers that can fly at twice the speed of sound. It's a bold move right out of the Cold War as the Russian president tries to establish a military foothold near American shores. A Russian bomber with an impressive wingspan touches down at America's doorstep. The Tu-160 has to deploy parachutes to slow down. Russian pilots, decked out in helmets and orange jumpsuits, climb out to a hero's welcome. Two of these bombers, nicknamed Blackjacks, are in Venezuela tonight. Vladimir Putin has deployed these warplanes, along with 2 support aircraft, to conduct exercises over the Caribbean with Venezuelan forces. A worrisome development for Washington, considering the capability of the Russian bombers, which can fly twice the speed of sound.
This bomber was designed to do both high-altitude and low-altitude penetration of airspace with nuclear weapons, to deliver nuclear weapons on target. This aircraft was designed to be an offensive-capable weapon to get into our airspace during the Cold War.
The deployment comes on the heels of Putin's recent military aggressions against Ukraine on land and sea, and countermoves by U.S. forces. Analysts say Putin is sending an unmistakable signal to the United States tonight.
He's clearly trying to send a message to the United States that he can play in our backyard and that Russia maintains significant military capabilities.
I think that's pretty accurate,
is the Cold War-style alliance of 2 strongmen who are both antagonists of the U.S., Putin and Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, who visited Moscow just last week. Experts say U.S. military and intelligence officials are closely watching the Putin-Maduro partnership and how it may work against American interests close to American shores.
They have a close military relationship. Russia does provide Venezuela with significant military support. Usually with these close military relationships, a close intelligence relationship is part of that.
The Russian deployment comes as Venezuela is deep in crisis, triggered by plummeting oil prices, crippling economic mismanagement, and violent protests against Maduro. U.S. officials tonight are skewering Putin and Maduro. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tweeting, "The Russian and Venezuelan people should see this for what it is. Two corrupt governments squandering public funds and squelching liberty and freedom while their people suffer. Putin's spokesman fired back.
It's probably not very appropriate to make such statements when you were a country with a military budget so big that half of it could feed the whole continent of Africa.
Analysts say none of this will stop Vladimir Putin from once again trying to gain a...
Nice joke, you heathen. But Africa's the continent that's feeding all you heathens. Yeah, that's right. You wicked fuckers, lying ass son of a bitch. Africa, far from poor, hungry, or broke. It's you raping motherfuckers that made it somewhat destitute as it is. If anything, you damn wicked ass heathens. That's why the Most High will rebuke all you damn heathen nations.
Russian foothold
That's
in
right.
America's hemisphere.
Putin has made it very clear through his actions and through his commentary that he intends to reestablish Russia to the level of influence of the Soviet Union.
Now, just...
Defense officials say this is the real deal. Russia test-firing its new high-speed hypersonic missile, a missile that the U.S. military currently cannot defend against. Russian President Vladimir Putin pulling no punches on his intent.
The new avant-garde missile system is invincible against today's and future air and missile defense systems of the potential enemy. This is a big success and a great achievement.
If the weapons work as advertised, there is no current defense against them.
The Russians...
Say that again, American heathen.
This is a big success and a great achievement.
If the weapons work as advertised, there is no current defense against them.
If this heathen's weapon works as advertised, there is no current defense against them. So how in the fuck can America still claim to be the world superpower when you clearly don't have the most power in the world?
The Russian missile has captured the attention of Patrick Shanahan, the Deputy Defense Secretary, who will take over as acting Pentagon Chief when Secretary James Mattis leaves next week. Shanahan warns the U.S. needs to be able to detect the fast-flying missile much further away than current radar systems can handle. The U.S. has to detect it thousands, not hundreds of miles away because of its high-speed approach. The Pentagon may spend more than $1 billion trying to develop and field its own capabilities.
We have a number of options going on with hypersonic missiles.
The Russians are making significant yet unproven claims about their missiles, saying it's capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. It flies up to 20 times faster than the speed of sound. It can adjust altitude and direction to avoid detection. Putin says it's invincible.
We're going to need a different set of sensors in order to see the hypersonic threats. Our adversaries know that.
The challenges are also political for President Trump, whose relationship with Russian President Putin has been rocky since July's Helsinki summit.
Putin feels incredibly emboldened. Putin believes this is the time to press his advantage. He's put his forces in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine. He's, of course, taken over Crimea. He's now gaining ground in Syria. This is Russia's time, in his view.
Now, because the Russians are putting so much effort into this new missile, the U.S. is responding by funding its own effort. The Pentagon says it has no choice but to proceed.
Yeah, let's take a look at it, Ryan. It's called the Avant-Garde Missile System, and it's called a system because what we're really talking about here is a hypersonic glider that you put on top of an ICBM to launch it into space and then get it closer to your target. It flies about 20 times the speed of sound. Some estimates have it up at Mach 27, incredibly fast, can carry a nuclear warhead. And the real scary thing about this is that as it closes in on its target, it can independently zig and zag and to avoid missile defenses. Now, the Pentagon, for their part, they are still working on hypersonic systems of our own, but it doesn't look like we're going to have a hypersonic system in development, or at least in the field, for at least 2 to 4 years from now. So the Russians...
But what would that mean anyway? That would only mean that they had a weapon to match that weapon. It still doesn't mean that they have a defense against this fucking weapon.
are ahead of us. focus on this. The other problem with this missile system is that our radar systems, according to the acting Secretary of Defense, Patrick Shanahan, are not strong enough, not capable enough of detecting it far enough away because of the speed. So this is a real worry, and it's got the Pentagon planners, I'm sure, working very, very hard. There's another system, an underwater system that the Russians are working on and that Putin has been bragging about. It's called the Poseidon. It is a nuclear-powered, that's right, it's a torpedo with a nuclear reactor in it that can also carry nuclear warheads. It is very long range, up to about 6,000 miles. It can travel at depths of up to 3,000 feet, and it's very fast. Somewhere the estimates are between 55 and 100 knots, 55 to 100 miles an hour underwater. The idea for this weapon is to go after large ships like aircraft carriers or shore installations. And again, this is not a system for which we have adequate defenses right now. Very worrisome. This is in testing right now, not in the fleet, not as far along as the Avant-Garde. Now look, the Russians have also been doing a lot of military buildup and increasing their capabilities
Watch
throughout
this
the whole
shit.
year. Back in March, they tested a new intercontinental ballistic missile called the Satan II, which can carry up to 26 independently targeted.
So you see who this heathen working with. I mean, it's just, you know what I'm saying? That's why when you niggas sit there and proclaim that this is how judgment gonna come from the Most High as a ultimate judgment, you're worshiping this goddamn beast, his image, and who he worships, Satan. That's right, you niggas worship Satan, because these are the weapons of Satan that we gonna destroy as Israelites.
Increasing their capabilities throughout the whole year. Back in March, they tested a new intercontinental ballistic missile called the Satan II, which can carry up to 26 independently targeted warhead re-entry vehicles, if you will, 10 of them of a large size. In September, back in the fall, they did war games with China. Now, these war games in the East have typically been done to deter China. They've been about sort of making sure China knew not to mess with Russia. This year, they worked with China to send a message to the West and to the United States in particular. Back in October, of course, they've now, using satellite imagery, we've been able to tell they've been upgrading military installations in Kaliningrad on the Baltic Sea, right on the doorstep of NATO. And then in November, they tested a satellite system called the Nesting Doll. Now, what's really interesting about this is not so much the actual satellite itself, but the little satellite that comes out that it puts into space outside of it. Now, the Russians will tell you this is about being able to work on satellites, that this little guy is meant to go fix and repair other satellites that they have in orbit, but the Pentagon is worried that what it could be is actually a targeting mechanism to go after Western satellites, either with lasers or maybe even to crash into them. So the Russians have been very busy this year. This is going to be certainly on the plate of Pentagon planners and the new Secretary of Defense, whoever that ends up being, well into 2019.
That's right. Bless the Most High. All right, little war report. Night watching. Salutations, saints. Be not terrified. God.